everyone, and welcome to another Thursday night live stream here on Bourbon Bites. I'm very, very excited for tonight's stream. It's probably one of the most regular guests we've ever had on the channel, which I'm super excited for. Of course, I will introduce him in just a second. But first, I want to give a couple shout outs to everyone here in the chat. I know some of you guys I know a lot of people are live tonight. I saw Independent Joe was on earlier. I'm actually going to be on his channel this Saturday in person. I'm driving down to where he's at and going to be on his channel. So I'm sure a lot of people come over halfway through, maybe, but hopefully some of you guys are catching the replay. If so, make sure to leave a comment below for everyone watching the replay. I see James Taylor here in the chat. James is one of our Bite Club members on the channel. Speaking of which, Bite Club members and patrons get early access to the video version of my podcast. So tomorrow's episode is going to be regular podcast form, but if you are a patron or a Bite Club member, you get the video version. So I'm super excited to share that with you guys. Thank you, James, for tuning in. I see Donnie's here in the house, one of our incredible mods here. Brandon as well, mod team on the. Brandon was also on my channel this past Saturday. We did a bunch of canned cocktails. That was a lot of fun. He's also featured on tomorrow's podcast, so I gotta definitely check that out. Whiskey Mountains, Adriana is here. Also, shout out, I'm just getting all those shout outs at the beginning. Check out this Sunday. She is doing an Alzheimer's fundraiser stream on her channel. I'll be a part of that. I'm super excited for that. I was a part of it last year. Y'all go check out Whiskey Mountain's channel. Someone drop her link. I mean, you might be a mod. Drop your own link if you're a mod. But good to see you, Adriana. Also see 21090 in the house. Mr. Whiskey Shits. Alexander. Some great people showing up tonight. Good to see y'all. Cool Running in the house. Steve Burkow. And Lil, cheers, lurking in the background. It feels like a lot of people are lurking tonight, but hey, I appreciate you here. Those of you watching live and people watching the replay. So let's go ahead and get into it. Without further ado, let's please bring on our amazing guest from Stellum Spirits as well as Barrel Craft Spirits. Please welcome Will Schragis. Will, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me again. I when I was backstage before, I felt like saying Happy New Year because I feel like I saw you a couple times and then we took a 6-month hiatus, but it's really great to be back.
I'm super excited because I have not had a chance to really dive into some of the newer releases from Stellum. I know I had you on when Stellum basically first launched, and I think that was the last time I spoke to you. And since then, I've picked up a couple single barrels, but tonight we're doing something like really cool. This actually just launched. I just got the press release like less than a week ago.
Yeah.
So what are we trying tonight?
So we're gonna have 3 whiskeys tonight. The first was released last year, which was called Stellum Black, and it was expression that we released of Stellum, trying to take the sort of core identity or the ethos of the Stellum from a whiskey perspective, and incorporate older, in some ways lower proof, kind of more oxidized and aged out barrels, knowing that unlike core regular classic Stellum, we would not be able to recreate it. So we called it Stellum Black. It was supposed to be this sort of not one-off, but like Stellum Black comes out every once in a while. And we got really good responses to the whiskey, but I think we went a little bit too minimal with the way that we explained it. And so we had Stellum and we had Stellum Black, and we ended up having to do a lot of what we call verbaling in the whiskey or the restaurant industry, where it's like you explain to someone as they're buying it or tasting it what it is, and it doesn't explain itself well enough. And so this year, as we were discussing like the very beginning of this year, how do we do Stellum Black in a way that is more consumer friendly? How do we make Stellum Black this year and explain the differences between Stellum Black last year and Stellum Black this year? Because the way that it's blended, I can get into that, is a situation where we wouldn't ever be able to recreate a blend perfectly the way that we do Stellum. And we decided, first of all, that we don't need to do it on quite as large a scale because we have a lot of ingredients. And when I say ingredients, I mean barrels of whiskey that we really have like one that is presenting a certain way. And when we are staying to a reasonably small scale in a blend, it means one bucket or one barrel will totally change the blend. And so we had these like really cool, I know we've talked about this before, like almost like soul searching product development blending meetings. And what come out of a lot of them is we're talking about making the whiskey better. And then we kind of figure out where we should have started conceptually by talking through the whiskey. And where we really came out on Stellum talking about Stellum Black versus the Stellum Specialty Blends, which we're going to try afterwards, is we made Stellum Black once, and it was a large composed blend. It was basically the size of a batch of barrel bourbon. But when we started making barrel bourbon, we had this definition of small batch, which was if you add 1 barrel, it drastically changes. And if you get bigger than that, you're not a small batch anymore. And
Right.
so we kind of went back to like, we don't need to make enough for the whole year with Stellum Black. We can just make these like really cool projects, and we can put them under the Stellum moniker because the blending style that we can get into while we're tasting them is the Stellum blending style, and the flavor profile is the Stellum flavor profile. But we can give them names that place them in the history of the brand or in our experience of making it for the people that are drinking it with us. So let's taste Stellum Black first, just because I
Yeah. And
think
I
it's a
think
really good basis for the other two.
so I was telling you a bit earlier, I actually have never had Stellum Black before, and I feel like I haven't really heard anyone from the Stellum brand kind of really talk about, because I mean, a lot of people, I mean, everyone's number one question is like, oh, well, I thought Stellum was supposed to be the more affordable brand.
Mm-hmm.
Stellum Black kind of puts it back into the barrel territory and pricing.
Right.
So you kind of touched on it a little bit, but can you tell us a little bit about, what differentiates the Stellum Black versus maybe like a barrel, with some of the batches of barrel?
Yeah, so the first thing is Stellum and Barrel to us, it's not the more affordable brand and the less affordable brand. It is
Okay.
two different identities, a little bit in a branding way, but also in the types of whiskey we're looking to make way.
Okay.
Stellum is our foot solidly staying in classic bourbon and classic rye. What has happened with Barrel in the past, especially 3 years, but I would say 5 years, but especially 3 years, is we did the thing that we said we were trying to do, which is we want to be one of, if not the premier blending house in America. We want to sort of push forward what whiskey can be in the country.
Mm-hmm.
But in doing that, our top items are Dovetail, Seagrass. Like they're items that are no longer they're a cool whiskey. They're not a classic bourbon or a classic rye. And even
Mm-hmm.
the batches of bourbon in barrel, each time we're trying to put them together, it's like, let's highlight this one set of barrels in a way that couldn't happen anywhere else and might not be able to happen again. Mm-hmm. And so Stellum, it started as we can now make this recreatable blend and let's create a flavor profile for ourselves. But what has evolved from Stellum, and as barrels continue to evolve, the difference is not so much pricing or affordability. It's that Stellum is a bourbon drinker's bourbon no matter what, or a rye drinker's rye no matter what. And Barrel is what's the best whiskey we can make no matter what. And that difference is it makes for different decision making in blending quite a bit. Stellum is also a much simpler brand. It's even with these Stellum Black and Stellum Specialties, it's Stellum Bourbon, Stellum Rye, single barrel bourbon, single barrel rye, single barrel black or specialties, or rye specialty, bourbon specialty. Like, it's two product lines and verticals on them really easily.
And I think I remember last time we spoke, we're talking about Stellum. It was more about, hey, we can create this consistent flavor profile. It's going to always be the Stellum flavor profile. Versus, like you said, with Barrel, you get so many different sources of different things. So that makes a lot more sense. And I'm glad that I was able to ask you that, because I've also been curious, like, hey, what makes it different? But that puts it into a different perspective, and it makes a lot of sense. So
I think also when you have a new brands are like kind of living things in that they fail if they don't respond to the people who are running them and the people who are supporting them to find identity. And so Stellum is still in this moment of its life where we're focusing on the whiskey. We're trying to talk about the whiskey in the best way we can. We're trying to have some of this. We're a modern, science-driven, like, these are the things that made it so that we decided to do the brand at all. But we are also learning how to express it with each release and each interview like this and each press release with Aaron and all of those different things. And so, yeah, I'm glad you asked the question, because it's good to say it out loud.
Our friend Adriana says, one's classic, one's the creative side. Makes sense. Yeah. So to compare to Stellum and Barrel being, this is the best, especially we may not can replicate it, but hey, this is the best thing we can put out. So absolutely. And good to see you, Adriana, here. Emily Chambers says, cheers, y'all. Make sure to hit the smash button, the like button. Yes. Thank y'all so much. So I'm actually trying out a new nosing technique taught to me by Chris from Big League Bourbon. It's something I've done before, but never for a stream. So I actually poured all three of these that we'll be drinking tonight about an hour before I went live, kind of like covered them up with some challenge coins. And I'm going to use these as my nosing notes. I do have another glass for a tasting, because it's, you don't want to drink something that's been sitting out for an hour. But I will say the nose on this one is really, I will say I have less experience with Stellum Bourbon. I've bought a lot of Stellum Rye. I love Stellum Rye. So it's nice to go back to the bourbon, especially because I've been so long since I've had it. But like you said, this is a very classic kind of bourbon note, and it's still the the three blend, right? The Kentucky, Indiana, and Tennessee.
Yep. So there is a slightly higher percentage of Kentucky and Tennessee in it, and there's a much higher percentage of old bourbon in it.
Gotcha.
What's really cool, I think, is, and I'll talk about Stellum Black first, but having Stellum Black and Stellum Black or Stellum Equinox at the same time, because they have a lot of similarities, and there's one major difference. There's a dimension that Equinox have that Black doesn't have, and Black is a softer, I know people don't like this word, but smoother bourbon in some ways. Stellum Black, even though it wasn't the original concept, it's like a cigar drinker's bourbon. It's it's high proof enough to be really flavorful, but it is a very long finish and a very sweet bourbon, very like opulent style of bourbon.
Yeah, on
it's
the
like
nose,
a sipping bourbon. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just saying on the nose, I'm getting like a lot of like it's like a mix of like a nuttiness, but not necessarily peanut. It's more of like maybe like I don't know. I'm not good at. I mean, we talked a little bit earlier. Like I'm not the best at nosing notes, but there's like a nuttiness, but it kind of is complemented by like there's like a chocolatey berry, like a chocolate covered strawberry maybe, or something on the nose. But I mean,
I get a lot of like hazelnut or Nutella on it's like it's nutty, but it's this like kind of sweet and almost foresty kind of nut to me.
Yeah, that's definitely. I mean, that makes a lot of sense because I was saying the chocolatiness, so it kind of those two are very complementary. Of yeah, for sure on the nose. Smells great. I can't wait to try it. So, let's go ahead and dive into the Stellum Black. I was curious what the proof on that. So my batch is 109.22.
Yeah. So we only released Stellum Black once, so it's all
Okay,
109.
gotcha.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it. You said smooth, but like, and smooth is sometimes taken as like a negative thing. But I was saying for something that high proof, it drinks. I mean, it drinks. I almost want to say it drinks lower proof than that, which it could be a good thing. But to me, it has a lot of that the mouthfeel on that's incredible. It's super rich. It's super viscous compared to some of the other ones I've had that are the regular Stellums. I think this one's a whole league of its own in terms of like the way it presents itself, and man, that finish is great.
Yeah, and it was such a cool blend, and it's kind of exciting now on the sort of sales size that I work on, knowing that we're never going to do Stellum Black that way again. And we're only releasing it slowly because as we build the rest of the company, we kind of want that reference even in the market for Stellum Black for a little while because it was the first of all these blends. It's a really cool one-time release whiskey. It's just one that we're it's in bottle, but it's being held back, if you will.
Gotcha. I kind of regret not trying it sooner because I really like this. But hey, I'm excited to see what's new from you guys. So it's nice to have that as a basis. That's why I kind of asked for that because I hadn't had the opportunity to try it. So it's going to be really fun going from, what you guys came out with, last year versus these two new incredible blends. So if you're ready to move on, we can move on to the Equinox blend. So
yeah, so I'll start sort of the method of blending the Stellum Black series, or what is becoming the Stellum Specialty series, is we take either already blended core Stellum or some of the components from core Stellum, and we try to improve upon them. We blend in different rarer, older barrels, or barrels that we know that we're not going to have enough of, so the final volume has to stay small enough that they will still make a difference in the final blend. They're above what we call perception threshold, which means you can tell that they're there. And then we let it sit and we sort of let it mingle. We think about it. We go back and we try to polish it again. We end up doing that. We did it 5 times for Stellum Black. We ended up doing it 6 times for the Equinox Blend. And what that does is, first of all, it allows the whiskey to totally mingle and then become an ingredient that we add on to again. Which is time consuming, but really helpful for the blending process because you kind of get to, it's like letting it proof if you're baking. It also means that there's no recipe that could be followed again because there's so much it's the timing of letting it sit and then adding something else. If we put it all together at the same time, it wouldn't taste the same. And if you taste Stellum Black, it is this really easy to drink, like I said, kind of cigar drinkers, smooth, long bourbon. and it eases into the flavor quite a bit. Like the front palate, the beginning of the sip of Stellum Black is quite easy. Stellum Equinox, what's interesting is it has that same long finish, but it actually has a punch at the front too. And those were different steps of blending. We actually put it together. It was much more similar to Stellum Black, and we had these two high-proof old Kentucky barrels they were like over oaked. They were a little abrasive, but we really liked them in the blend. And so the last thing that was blended in was actually the front palate. And it didn't end up affecting the end that much because it wasn't very much bourbon, but it like gave this like upfront flavor punch that then falls back into. So I like sort of think of it as a like spike and then a tail. Whereas Stellum Black to me is just kind of like this like very easy hill, if you will.
Right. Yeah. So the nose, I mean, I've just nosed it so far. It's very different. I feel like you said, the black is just more of like a classic, like, you know, like a darker, I think it's darker, I think. Whereas this one, it's bright up front. And I think maybe that's that barrel that you're talking about that was added in to help with the front of the palate. But
yeah.
And there was a question I didn't want to miss. By the way, if you guys have any questions throughout the stream, please leave us in the chat. I will get through as many of them as we can. Adriana asks, so the Stellum Black was a one-time, and these specialty Stellums will have different names, or all the Stellum specialty ones, are they going to be Stellum Black releases? So yeah, so this is blend number 1. Yeah,
this is great. I will show this now because so the Stellum Black bourbon looked a lot like the Stellum label, except it's black. And it was a one-time release. And now each subsequent release will be named. It is still a black label. It's basically the same label.
Let me highlight you so let's see if this works. There we go.
Here. But it will have the name as well. And of course, the back label will be different explaining it. So each one of them is its own single one-time release. What we did with this one, the Equinox Blend, because what ended up happening is we did that 6th step, the last step of blending on the night of the Vernal Equinox. So when we were deciding how to name it, we were talking about how like when we started making the blend, it was like still dark out when we got to the distillery. And then when we finished the blend, it was like kind of spring. And like there was a cool, like the world felt also like when we started the blend, we were in like deep Omicron lockdown. And when we finished the blend, it was like we were back. And so it wasn't designed to be a like celebration of the spring, but it just kind of became that way for us. Like we finished it and the world felt really different at that moment.
Well, it's so very fitting with the brand.
It fit. Yeah. And so we decided to call it number 1 because another reason for these Stellum specialty blends is we're trying to find this right place with these where they're small enough that we can make them really uniquely good, but they are big enough where enough people can try them that it is not like a trophy game. I know I've said this before, but like our company, just kind of like in our opinion on whiskey, we're not so interested in making no one can have them trophies. And so we called it the Equinox Blend number 1 because if that resonates with people, we want to be able to, it'll be a different blend, but we'll celebrate the Equinox again next year. We'll do the Equinox number 2.
Gotcha.
And the same thing happened with the Fibonacci that we'll try afterwards. But I want to make sure to stay on this for as long as people have questions.
Yeah. So on the palate, so I think it's also quite different. Honestly, I think this drinks more of my style of bourbon. I think to me, first of all, I don't know for sure, but to me, it has a bit more of a Kentucky, Indiana forward taste. I think, I'm losing the Tennessee, which for me is usually a good thing. I think it's a longer finish, honestly. And I think I said on the nose, it was brighter, but on the palate, to me, it tastes like there's more oak going on. So like you said, there's maybe some older bourbon in here too. Yeah, but it's less sweet, it's drier. But for me, that's exactly what I'm looking for a bourbon. This also tastes really nice.
It has more of that kind of sweet spot, like 7 to 9 Indiana, which for people who like that is kind of the ultimate bourbon.
Oh my gosh, yes. I've been talking to a lot of brands, and they say that the older Indiana bourbon is so hard to get their hands on. Did you guys happen to maybe get your hands on this earlier? And it's just kind of been. Do you guys do aging at all on your?
Yeah, so we do we buy everything from new make to there's only 7 gallons left in the barrel.
Gotcha.
And it's a really fun but challenging thought process with the size of the company in the past couple of years. We will still there's 2 barrels that are cool and they're available, we'll buy 2 barrels.
Mm-hmm.
We'll buy one, but we prefer more than one, obviously. But when there's a consistent source like an MGP or one of the other major distilleries, and there's 500 barrels available or 1,000 barrels available, we're not looking at it like, what do we do with these 500 barrels? We're looking at it like, how many of these do we use now? How many of them do we vat and just use as an ingredient? And how many of them do we taste specifically and sort into other things?
Mm-hmm.
And then how many do we use 1 year from now when they're 1 year older, and what are they going to taste like, and so on and so forth. So one lot of barrels actually becomes 9 or 10 different concepts that we think about doing things with and how to allocate to. And then you look at angel share and loss, and it's like, okay, gallonage, like we have to adjust for that. And then there's also like, where do we store them? Do we store them all in the same place, or do we store them in different places to create differentiability, like differentiation? The same thing goes for, I'm not sure if you've noticed this in our releases, but our blending team, Joe, Nick, Tripp, me, none of us are fans of overly oaky whiskey. And so we actually do quite a bit of pulling whiskey out of barrel and letting it sit in stainless steel for extended periods of time, so that it blows off, it oxidizes, it continues to see air, but it doesn't see wood. And that's only really possible because, you know, you don't continue aging it age statement wise when you pull it out of the barrel.
Right.
It doesn't mean it doesn't change in the tank. And so like it doesn't change over the course of 1 month or 2 months or 3 months, but over the course of a year or two, if there's air exposure, it will. And so we also look at it like, we can take 100 barrels and we can vat 50 of them. We can sort 50. So smell or taste them and pull single barrels out of them, and then sort into other ingredients, the ones that we don't feel like are in balance. We can then take that vat and we can use half of it over the course of a year. And at the end of the year, we can either continue to blend into it for consistency, or we have an ingredient that's very different than the one that we used before. And so to answer your original question, we have a lot of old, and I don't mean 20, 30, 40-year-old bourbon, but we have a lot of sweet spot bourbon because we started before a lot of other companies that source barrels, looking at the longevity of sets of barrels when we were buying them.
Yeah, and I feel for the newer distilleries that are still sourcing from places like Indiana, and they're like, we can barely get our hands on anything above like 5. Like, I mean, that's the advantage you guys have. You guys have been in the game for a long time, and that's really exciting. I mean, for us as a consumer, I'm like, heck yes, give me the older the older whiskey. But I saw a question, I didn't want to miss it. Steve was asking, how long would be the mingling time, days, weeks, or months? So I think that was in reference to your comment earlier about the when maybe it was with the Equinox blend, like when you guys were adding to that. I believe that I missed when he asked.
Yeah, so the both Stellum Black and Stellum Equinox ended up taking us a little over 2 months to blend, but there are ingredients in them that have been mingling for a year, because they were sort of tank ingredients. They were things that were put together and left, and that is, you know, when I was here, I think the first time when we were talking, I don't remember what the first episode I was on was.
Oh, it was I rewatched earlier. I was like, dang, that was like, it was 2019, I believe.
And it was I can't remember. It was maybe one of the special releases in bourbon.
So the first one that you were here for, from, again, I just skimmed it right before this. It was we were talking. Seagrass wasn't out yet, I don't believe.
I see. Okay,
so we were talking Dovetail and Armida Barrel.
Yeah, because Seagrass was fall 2020. So
I think you were teasing. You were teasing because you were talking about something in the works, and I think that was when you were teasing Seagrass.
Interesting. Yeah, or I might have been teasing Armida at the time, because
you know what I think that makes more sense, because I actually didn't try that until like a year ago. So
I'm trying to remember what the point I was trying to make was.
I don't know.
Yeah. We were talking about ages or mingling time.
Yes.
The point was I trying to make there?
We can come back to it.
Yeah, come back.
It's no big deal.
Oh no, the point was that we, for a long time now, Barrel as a sort of blending house has been working on how to explain that the products we make are as unique to we are the only people that we make them. The whiskeys that we put together can only be made by us, just as much as someone who is distilling from grain. Not to say that it is the same thing. They're very, very different types of making whiskey, and we rely very much on people that are distilling from grain. But we are the processes that we use, and the fact that they are built on processes that we did for however many years make it so someone, doesn't matter how much money or access to barrels you have, just could not recreate it somewhere. So there's like provenance to our facility and provenance to our blending team and blending style and the ingredients that we call upon. And so when you talk about mingling time, that's a huge part of it, because even if the final blend mingled for 1 month or a week or whatever it was, it doesn't mean that those ingredients went from barrel to tank all at the same time. They went from barrel to being blended together over years in most situations. There's a couple of ingredient whiskeys that we make sure to always have 300, 400, 500 gallons of. And so we're doing blending projects that are actually only to make the ingredients that could not come from one set of barrels. So we'll see like a low proof, really like corn forward set of 5-year-olds, and we'll make sure that we're always dumping that so that we can use that ingredient when needed for other things.
Wow.
There's
That's pretty interesting. Yeah, and that's like the science. I see a lot of people saying like science in the chat. Yeah, like that's. I mean, it's an art. I mean, I've always said that blending and things like that are just as much of an art as distilling. You know, I think it's you along with your team. It's just like super talented in coming up with that. And I remember our previous. I think it was actually that first stream I had you on. We talked about that. You guys, you know, you aren't just sourcing from like one distillery in Kentucky, one in Indiana. You guys have so many connections out there, so you're able to kind of pick and choose and really tailor a very specific flavor profile. And I think that's something that I feel like, as many people that kind of try to do what you guys are doing, you guys have been doing it some of the longest of anyone that I'm aware of, and you guys just have all those connections, which is super exciting for, again, us as the consumers. I get excited for that.
And I think also it really speaks to Joe and his vision for the company and his evolution of his vision for the company, that it makes me feel cool when you talk about it like me and the team. It's really the team that's in Kentucky, and I get to sort of intellectually or like conceptually be there. But it's also that no matter how good you are, like, you're getting better if you are kept sharp by having new projects. And Joe and his like insistence on always pushing forward what we're doing means like we're always working to do other new cool things. And because of that, I think it also improves our ability to blend classic bourbon, classic rye, our ability to execute dovetail and seagrass and armida, because we're like always having to like stay sharp on what things are doing to each other over time.
Absolutely. And I also think back to that stream where you kind of told us how there's like, batch numbers hidden on the seagrass barrels. And I'm literally the weirdo that's like walking to Total Wine and like looking at every single seagrass bottle, like, what batch is that? What batch is that? So I love just the things like that. And we do have a question. I know we need to move on to the rye, because I know you have to go a little bit early tonight. So, but I want to put this question while I get the rye poured. Joseph asked, I've always had the impression that Stellum uses younger juice compared to barrel, much like Stellum Bourbon Company Fusion versus Discovery. Am I on the right track, or is that not quite the case?
That is not quite the case, though there is some truth in that. The Stellum, the base or the core Stellum, the green label and the blue label, both are based, even though we say it's 4 to 10 for the rye and it's 5 to 16 for the bourbon, they're both really based around this like 5 and 6 year old Indiana heart of the blend. We give ourselves a year younger in what age statement we're talking about, so that if something is a month or two before the age it needs to, we can use it if it works. But it's really that 5 or 6 core base. When you start looking at Stellum Black and Stellum Equinox and Stellum Fibonacci and all of these other Stellum specialties that we're working on, the age statement or the age blend or the ratio ends up looking a lot more like one of the barrel blends, except there have been a couple of barrel blends where there was just an awesome set of 5 or 6 or 7 year old barrels, and they made up a big portion of it. We just are always looking at using barrels for what they do best. And often with pretty much everything we do that's a blend now, there is an aspect to the finish of a whiskey that is really helpful if you have a little bit of old oxidative whiskey in there. And so much like some of the really good blended and vatted scotches, even in the 1, 2, 5, 12, 15% range, if you have something that brings a dimension that lasts longer than younger whiskey, as long as you can keep it to show, like it needs to show itself in the blend. That is sort of what makes variety blends more interesting than sort of single flavor profiles. Sometimes it's why there's like power in single barrels and there's spectrum of flavor in blends. So I guess to answer the question, yes, in terms of the core stellums are usually younger on average than a batch of barrel, but no, when you get to the black label stellums. The black label stellums are blended in a very different style than barrel because we're always starting with those same sort of base flavor profiles of stellum, but the average ages are about the same.
Gotcha. I see a few people in the chat are like experimenting with their own blends tonight. So hey, maybe we're inspiring people to do some blending. So I'm going to see that Eric the Barbarian's talking about blending some Penelope and Prideful Goat 6-year. Well, definitely cheers to experimenting. I need to do more blending myself.
And
I think
shout out to Chris Hart. It's the first time someone's mentioned Prideful Goat when I'm on one of these. That's Chris Hart is the head of Houston Bourbon Society. Prideful Goat is his project, and I love Chris, and I've seen Prideful Goat around a lot, but no one has asked me a question about it until now. So,
oh wow, I wasn't familiar with it, so that's very cool. I need to look into that. I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah,
awesome. Well, let's go to move on to the Fibonacci. I think I'm mispronouncing it again. So tell us about this one. So I know the name because of course, like the golden ratio, like that's kind of the inspiration. So, but tell us a little bit more about what makes this unique.
So it's funny. I was talking to Aaron about this today because we had been playing with the idea of a Fibonacci ratio batch for barrel for a long time. And part of it is we just, as everyone here can tell, we're a company full of nerds. And so the idea of this ratio that shows up like on everyone's SAT2, and then like when you're in, like if you're taking undergraduate biology and you have to like write a paper about it and it's dumb. And then once you know about it, you start noticing it everywhere. It's like, oh, the like bricks and the Western Wall are like laid in the Fibonacci ratio kind of thing. Not the Western Wall, one of the walls in Jerusalem. And like, it just like it pops up in all of these different places. There's all of this Sanskrit stuff with the Fibonacci ratio or golden ratio things in it. But also that the ratios within it, not all of them together, but the 1-to-1 ratio, the 1-to-2 ratio, the 2-to-3 ratio, the 3-to-5 ratio, the 5-to-8 ratio, they're all ratios that show up in like cooking and cocktail recipes too. And we just had this idea of like, we're not going to release it unless it's awesome, but let's look at ingredients that we like and try them in the Fibonacci sequence. But then we had to like switch, like which one is the 1 and which one is the 2 and so on and so forth.
Gotcha.
And it really started presenting itself clearly as we were tasting through it, what we needed, this was 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. It's like the 8 was very clearly this vat that we really loved, and we like wanted everything else to be additions to it. And so ultimately it's a blend of those 6 ingredients, but we volumetrically did it in the Fibonacci sequence because we liked the way it tastes, but also, again, we want each one of these Stellum specialties to kind of stand on their own as a concept and as a thing that is, you can sort of be part of the evolution of this brand with us as we are doing these cool one-off collectible whiskeys. And the like Fibonacci and the golden ratio is just something that like a lot of people have a little bit had to deal with that in their life in one way or another, either because they had to deal with it for some sort of professional or educational reason, or it's like they have sunflowers in their backyard, and at some point, if you're like reading about how to grow sunflowers, they're going to mention the fact that it's the Fibonacci sequence on the spiral in the middle of it. And so it is a name that we conceptually came up with this, and then we sort of figured out how to execute that concept. Also, it is an Indiana or MGP driven rye with a large variety of ages. And we learned from the Stellum Black rye and also from some of the barrel batches of rye and some of the barrel single barrels it's just amazing distillate. And so it was really a lot about just letting the whiskey be good whiskey in this situation.
I would say I just nosed the glass that I had poured before, and wow, it makes me really excited because it's everything I love about an Indiana forward rye, not necessarily totally Indiana rye, but it's got the sweet vanilla. To me, it's like it's even sweeter than that. It's like marshmallow fluff, like not just like marshmallows, but like like the in the jar. To
Hmm.
me, that's what I'm getting on the nose. But I'm also getting like there's like a backbone of like this. I don't want to say tannic, but like there's like a bit of oakiness that I think maybe is coming from the age of the whiskeys
Hmm.
involved here. But I'm really surprised to see that on the nose. So I'm really excited to get this one a taste.
Yeah, there's one of the ingredients that we have this vat that we use that it's like the rye malt vat. There's not any malted rye in it, but it's
Hmm.
a lot of the barrels are the 51% rye, 49% malted barley barrels. But then sometimes you get other rye mash bills out of MGP, and just some of the barrels come off as more malty. And so we vat those together, and that's one of the kind of middle ingredients of this. And so it gives that milk chocolatey in the mid palate. Um,
Mm.
when I think about Stellum Rye, the base rye, to me, it reminds me of some of the like old wax top Willets, the like 4 and 6 year Willets, where it's just like very, very classic 95.5, but just a little bit more complexity and interesting than you get because it has the Kentucky and the Indiana and older rye in it.
Hmm.
And the Fibonacci rye to me, and also the Stellum Black rye, which if anyone can find it, I don't really see it on shelves anymore. But to me, they have this like flash of really sweet milk chocolatiness in the middle of it, but the beginning of it is very classic rye, and the end of it's very classic rye. Um,
Hmm.
and I know it's a pricey bottle, but the Fibonacci rye to me is like as good a cocktail rye that can exist. It just works in the classic cocktails really, really well because it brings all of the rye flavor you want, and then also a little bit of the body and sweetness that you sometimes are missing in rye.
I was gonna say, yeah, I think it smells a lot sweeter. Like I think to me, palate wise, I mean, this has some depth to it. Like to me, this is like what I look for in a rye. To me, it's a sipping rye. I mean, I would use it in a cocktail, but like I'd rather just sip on it
Yeah.
neat. Like that's to me, this is like it's got the sweetness. It almost reminds me of some of the ryes that I've had that a lot of them traditionally have been Indiana ryes that have been like a rum finish to them. So
Hmm.
I'm getting a little bit of that sweetness that I normally associate with rum, but maybe it's coming from the actual rye itself. I don't know. I've just never experienced that without the rum finish on it. But yeah, super viscous, less oak than I think the bourbon one. But
Hmm.
I mean, man, I mean, I think that's gonna be my favorite so far. I mean, I'm a rye guy. I love rye. So I think for the price, I mean, I'm gonna be picking up a bottle of that as soon as I see it.
Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Well,
I really love all of them, but I like you. The flavors you can tease out of American rye, if treated well, to me, it's like it's just really fascinating whiskey, um, and the variety of oak usage in this blend. The fact that there's some 5 year old, and then there's also 7 year old, but it only spent 5 years in barrel, and then it spent 2 years in tank, and like, but then there's also 10 year old that was 10 years in barrel. Like there's all of these different. Uh, and so it sort of gives you the best of all of those things, or at least that was the hope, to give you the best of all of those things without having any one of them be the dominant profile of the whiskey.
yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, like Stellum Rye, just the standard release, has been one of my favorites. I've bought multiple bottles of it since it came out. So this is definitely an upgrade, but I think it's a well justified upgrade, at least in my opinion.
I'm
I'm
also
wondering,
I'm
oh, go ahead.
looking at Eric the
Oh
Barbarian.
yeah, yeah. I was actually about to
Uh,
highlight that.
so I just wanted to point out the like whiskey drink of the spring for me was seagrass in a
Mhm.
Boulevardier. So
Oh,
it's similar,
interesting.
but I was
Well,
I was finding myself with seagrass. I know this is more about Stellum, but
yeah.
I people in our company started drinking seagrass and tonic as this like we're gonna order at the bar because we're together and we're out. But we don't want to like make the bartender make a complicated cocktail right now. And then it's just like we had this moment where a lot of us realized that we like seagrass as a white spirit substitute, not a whiskey substitute in
Whoa.
cocktails, because there's so little oak in seagrass. Like seagrass is
Oh
like
yeah.
it's so much fruit for a whiskey. And then someone was like, "What about a seagrass Negroni?" And we are like, "That's going to be great." And we made it. And then we are like, "This is just a seagrass Boulevardier. Like, there's already a drink for this. We don't."
Uh-huh.
And so we got there by accident at this bar one night in our like a couple people from our company out. But then I started making them, and the 111 like bitter vermouth Seagrass Boulevardier was my work drink of the spring for sure.
Oh man, that you've inspired so many ideas in my head right now. I actually just realized we were out of sweet vermouth right now, and I'm like, tomorrow I will go to the store and I will try that out because that sounds. I mean, seagrass. A lot of people have said, including some of my friends, that seagrass is a very like spring and summer whiskey, which is funny because most people talk about whiskeys being like a fall drink, but seagrass is so bright. I think you said seagrass and tonic. I'm a gin and tonic kind of guy too, so like now I'm like, right when the stream ends, I'm gonna go make me a seagrass and tonic.
Yeah,
So
try it. It's a really tasty, easy drink. Also, since you mentioned being out of vermouth, if you can find it, there's a vermouth called Vermouth, Vermut. And they make a beautiful blanc vermouth and a beautiful sweet vermouth. They don't make a dry vermouth, as far as I know. They just make blanc and sweet. But they are sherry-based vermouths, and they are awesome. They're cheap and they're awesome in cocktails. And
I will definitely, because like I said, I'm gonna go to the store tomorrow to find that. So
they're reasonably easy to find if you're looking for them, but it's like you never notice them if you don't see them.
I will keep an eye out. We do have one question about the rye that we were just drinking, and then we will wrap up here. Adriana says, did you try different components and different combinations for the ratio, or kind of knew which would be which as you crafted using the ratio?
So the real thing was we weren't sure how far into the ratio we were going to go. And so it ended up as 6, and the hardest decisions was the 1-1. So it was 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. It was what seems like the beginning of the ratio, but is actually the end of the blend, which is like, what's the small thing that we can place into this to bring complexity in? And we didn't really know what those were going to be. We really had a good idea of what 3, 5, 8 were going to be. But we tried it in all of the different combinations. And so that's some insight that we probably wouldn't have put in a sell sheet, but that's
no, it's good to know. I see everyone saying like, oh man, I need a work drink. And then Mark says, work drink is this guy's profession. I know. Maybe we were talking about earlier, like maybe I should get into the spirits industry. That sounds like pretty great.
Yeah, it's really, if anyone has any questions, like I always love talking to people about working in the alcohol industry, because it's very much a job, but it is one where you get to spend a lot of time with like-minded and cool people for the most part. And it's one where if you are able to treat it like a job, even though it's fun, there's so much opportunity, because no one plans on getting into the spirits industry. You just kind of do it. And then the people that are good at it are the people that work as hard as they would at any other job and take themselves, like, are able to do an interview and then drive because they're not drinking on the interview, kind of thing. And like that, not everyone does that in the alcohol industry. And if anyone ever wants to reach out to me because they're thinking of actually doing it, please do. I feel very blessed or lucky that I was able to make a career out of something that I sort of fell into in my 20s. And so, sorry, not to get all sappy on it. But
no, that's awesome. I love hearing like people that are passionate about it. And I think you were, like you said, like being so young and being in the industry, I think that's super exciting, and it gives me hope for the future of the industry, honestly. So
thank you. That's really
awesome. So,
that's really wonderful to hear.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, is there anything that you guys have coming up? And we already know about these were just released, so you guys may not have anything else, but is there anything you want to tease us? Because you always leave us with a good tease. Maybe, whether it's Stellum or Barrel, is there anything that's exciting?
Yeah. So there's a cola that leaked earlier this week. It's not all 20, but it's roughly a 20-year-old expression of Dovetail that's getting released in the next month or so. So it's the gray label Dovetail. So I know we had the gray label Seagrass that came out, and the gray label Dovetail is coming out. And it's not really a tease because the cola leaked, so I can just talk about it.
I do, nice. Not gonna lie, I saw that.
Yeah. And then I also, though, the releases I'm sort of most excited about right now in the Stellum world are these two, the Equinox and the Fibonacci. There are 2 other Stellum specialty blends that were made for different reasons that are out there and occasionally pop up either on our website or other websites for sale, that they don't have black labels, but they should have. We hadn't figured out the label convention yet when we were putting them together. They do have the second, and one is the Death & Co. blend, and it was a blend that we made for Death & Co. And there were like 150 cases of it or so made, and it's on all of their cocktail menus, but there's like 4 or 5 stores around the country that carry it too, and most of them are close to the Death & Co.'s. And you can find it online in a couple places also. And then there's another one called Stellum Tara, that was the first prototype, even before Stellum Black.
Mm.
And that one was only offered to whiskey clubs. It didn't go into any stores. And so it also occasionally shows up online. But for people who like chasing stuff down, it's not a tease because they're in the past. And actually,
True.
I think that there was more precision put into how to talk about and also in some ways blend these two that are coming out now. But they are fun things to find because there were so little of them and they are around. And so if you're getting into the like chasing these Stellum releases, those are the old ones, and they're easy to notice because they have blue labels instead of black labels.
Gotcha. We have a suggestion from our resident scientist, Adriana. She's the one I mentioned earlier that's working on Alzheimer's research. She's a fantastic, or Dr. Adriana, I should call her, but she said a pie blend. Maybe next,
Maybe, and thank you for your work. Unfortunately, that is a disease that has really plagued my mother's side of my family, and so
same with me and my father's side. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the work you're doing.
Yeah, she's amazing. So you guys make sure to tune into her stream this Sunday. It's 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. I will be there. But Will, thank you so much for coming on. This was so much fun. I'm always glad to have you on talking about your new stuff that you're working on.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. And let's make sure to get one on the books for later this year because we'll have all of our holiday season holiday season stuff coming out in the fall too.
Oh, that's very exciting. Yeah, absolutely. I will be in touch with Aaron for that. So for those of you that are patrons, I will be joining you with a seagrass and tonic for our hangout after the stream. But thank y'all so much for watching. Y'all make sure to follow Stellum Spirits all over. They're really active on Instagram, I know for sure. But follow them wherever you can follow people. So Will, cheers to you, and thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, talk to you soon.
All right, bye everyone.